I'm jumping in right now. My point was, but you guys got to it, is that a personal brand is critical for passive candidates. So you've got to have a good company brand for people to apply to.
Yes.
But if you're trying to reach the people that are not actively looking for a job, which is going to be the case in any tough specialty niche job you're filling, it's going to be all about the credibility and the personal image of the person that's the recruiter, you know, what we're calling a rock star recruiter. So, you know, you got to have both.
Well, let me expand on that a little bit. How many in here work for a company that has less than 1,000 employees? Okay. The bulk of people work for a company that has less than 1,000 employees. They don't have huge, giant brands. They might have a big brand within the city they're located in, but they're not going to have these big brands that are going to give them the same flexibility as a large company. And so relying on that individual recruiter, your hiring managers, to be representing you and your organization and getting the word out to people at everything that they can possibly be at. Yes, it's a reflection back on your brand, but really it's not your corporate brand that is doing it, it's the people that are making that connection.
If you have one recruiter, is that person's own direct brand not your employment brand?
Yes and no. Well, no, because you just even said yourself, if that person left, they're not going to say, gosh, I really liked Sarah, but she worked for company ABC, but now she went to company XYZ, so I must still really like company ABC better. No, they're going to say, oh, we're still just going to go with Sarah.
But I think good recruiters know how to translate and target their employment brand to attract the candidates. They're gonna go in and they're gonna dig in and they're gonna stick their finger in that wound, that career wound, and they're gonna make it bigger. And then they're gonna show the candidate, this is why you called me, this is why you want to leave, and this is what we're offering you. So I think that's I don't want to say it's recruiting 101, but it's almost like cheap psychology. You can use that, and if you're not leveraging it, then you need to.
Completely agree. So I think back to the question though, when we look at as a candidate, external candidate, if I'm, Fidelity, I was in Boston for 6 years, invest. Fidelity in the room, one of those organizations that I would say must be, awesome organization, privately held, wonder what's going on in there, I get all this mystery, right? And I say, must be full of awesomeness. Awesome brand, trust them with my money, all these things, must be amazing. You buy that? That's strong employer brand, strong company brand, I follow the green line, right? If I have an interaction with Fidelity, that is less than awesome, with one of your frontline recruiters, less than awesome, doesn't that diminish my perception of your awesome brand? Therefore, brand matters on the corporate level. It's almost inseparable from the strong individual recruiter brand. Agree, disagree? Hit the mic.
She said it's candidates or consumers, but candidates are consumers. They're just, as you mentioned earlier, consumers of work and talent, or work. Yeah.
So but that's my point. So I look at it and I say, we're only as strong as our weakest link in recruiting. That was always my issue in recruitment management was, I can't say I only want this person working these important recs. At some point, lifetime value of a candidate says, I don't know when you're going to enter, when you're going to start in with my organization, but I want to make sure that I've got strong, empowered people. Right. You call it employer, it's candidate brand or individual brand with the recruiter. But I think that don't we agree that they feed each other?
Absolutely.
Why are we even talking about this? Well, isn't this the new employer brand? Is the corporate recruiter brand?
Well, you wanted us to throw down, so we were kind of
throw down. We
like
talk about it as if it's
TV,
brand, correct? Right?
On TV.
What's some questions? Questions on this topic? Do you agree?
Do you agree that everybody has a brand? That all of your employees have a brand? So the bulk of people in here are saying yes, and the other half are looking at me like I'm crazy. So Charlie.
So what happens when an organization strives to build this brand, but it's a misleading brand? Yeah. It's not really who they are. Then enters ethics and all this other stuff. But I think we have to be very cautious about creating a brand for the sake of creating a brand.
Right.
Talk more about that, though. Talk more about creating a brand for the sake of creating a brand. Individual or corporate?
Corporate. I mean, I think that if we chase after the buzz of brand, because everybody else is doing it and we all need a strong brand to be successful in the talent market, that's fine, but you have to do that thoughtfully, and you have to make sure it's based on the innards of your organization, what you really are. I think sometimes people use a brand to portray something that is not, and that makes me nervous in the employment space.
Charlie, let me challenge you on that. Do you think every company, I mean, we have a number of companies in here that are small businesses. Do you think every company really needs a strong employment brand? Because I don't think they do. I think they just need to have some employment brand. They don't need to have a possibilities employment brand. They don't need to have some of the other employment brands we've seen over the years.
Have jobs.
I mean, that's part of...
A company needs to have jobs, and you have candidates.
That's part of what I'm saying.
I mean, they just need to have something, even just a page on their website. I mean, that's as simple as branding can get. We always forget about that lowest common denominator. It's just something simple. Just tell somebody about who you are. That's all you have to have.
And that's kind of what I'm driving at. Bill Borman just tweeted out,
Thank you, Bill.
the best way to have a strong employer brand is to have a good company.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not about manufacturing it.
That's exactly right.
Well, and make sure people know you have a good company.
By accident. You don't want to create a brand by accident. And if you don't do something or have some thought in that process, it'll be done by accident, and then it will be in the recruiting community. And then once the recruiters get a hold of it and twist it, now we're recruiting out of there. We're using it to our advantage. To we all know companies that we want to pull from.
I agree, and I think, Charlie, on your point, are we saying that quite perhaps those of us responsible for talent acquisition aren't hiring people who are aligned to our corporate brand to actually recruit for us? Gasp, right? These are the kinds of things that if we get overheard, right? If we get the process right and we understand these things, we should be hiring all people, including our own, that fit with that. That it is authentic because you believe. So interesting points. Always good to come from you, Allison.
So I think there's an interesting kind of convergence. So you mentioned Fidelity. So 40,000 employees. They obviously represent our brand. We have to leverage them to represent why somebody should work for Fidelity, right? So we have to get them to speak the voice of our employment brand. The way they're going to do that, though, is really through our corporate brand. So they're going to understand their role in the organization, and they can convey the message of Fidelity the best. I think what happens with the recruiters is they have to take the value of the company and what that delivers and message that in an employment brand perspective. So it's kind of taking all of these aspects and thinking about the different angles and conveying that to the right audience at the right time.
I don't want to own this, but at some point so I'm hearing corporate brand as a guidepost for your individual brand. Yeah. Right? I mean, to me, I think that is, as we have workforces that are understanding now, what does this mean? What do you mean I'm responsible for my words and my actions and my thoughts, right? If we can look to our organizations that we fit in and belong to say, you know what, that is right. I do believe that. It's enabling building stronger brands or perpetuating that. Is that fair?
Right, yeah.
I like that. That's a blog post, Allison. Yeah. You should get on that.
I'll lean over.
You don't blog.
Write it up. You can
write it up. Master, if you can bend all the way down.
Down here to the microphone, just so that we don't have to adjust for other people. You know, the one thing that annoys me about the whole conversation about corporate brands, and I'm going to be completely honest with you, the vast majority of organizations that have any form of branding program or activity look at branding as marketing.
Exactly.
And they try to brand the organization as this single, all-enticing entity that is the same to everyone. And we all know that if I work in finance and you work in marketing, we don't experience our company the same exact way. It's a very different organization. So if it comes back to which matters more, the individual brand or the corporate brand, I'd say if your recruiters are divisionally aligned and they're embedded in that business, they're probably one and the same. But if you have this centralized recruiting model, there's going to be some disconnect. Yeah. And organizations that try to go to market, Pepsi can go to market with possibilities because they've got very ingrained management practices that cover the entire organization. Those systematically deliver possibilities. Most organizations don't have any consistency in management practice, and because they have no consistency in management practice, they have no consistency in employee experience.
Sure.
Again, if I weren't sitting up here, it would be Twitter gold. That's Twitter gold, right?
And just as an extension of that, just one quick comment, because when Sarah said small companies or medium-sized companies may not need an employee brand, what hit me was that inconsistency in what we think about as a brand that Master just addressed. And I try to think more simply that for most companies who don't have all the resources to build this case of brand, they have to be able to say why people come and why people stay. They may have to differentiate because people come for different reasons, for different groups. So they really have to understand why people come and why people stay. I don't see how you can recruit in a company in which you can't answer that question. You can, of course, but then you have to make it up. And then we have all kinds of issues that go on from that perspective. So I really want to see in every company, regardless of size, their ability to articulate why people come and why they stay. And I think that's one of the responsibilities of a recruiter.
I think, to talk off what he's saying, I think for a lot of companies outside of, the big global, the large organizations, branding is a pretty scary word. It starts getting associated with, you go to these conferences, you watch them streaming, and you see these huge companies get up and talk about branding and all of these things they're doing, and you get really intimidated thinking, I don't even have a marketing department. I have like Joe that works in the hall that half the time does the other stuff too. And so we get really intimidated, and I think a lot of it is the terminology itself and what we keep calling it branding, when it's really just talking about your culture and talking about your organization, and like Jerry said, understanding who your company is and being able to sell it as is.
But your recruiters are going to do that when they're talking to candidates and selling the job. They don't need to be this rock star recruiter or have to be, I'm John, I'm wonderful, and have this awesome personal brand to do it. They have to be able to articulate that and leverage that, and they're going to do it whether you have control over it or not, and they're going to do it. And if you don't pay attention to it, they're going to mix the message. I don't want to say the B word, but they're going to mix the message. And then what do you do? Now again, you've created something by accident, and you have no control over it. So you've got to have that control, and you've got to look at your recruiters and listen to what they're articulating, because they may be, that one recruiter A may be saying something, recruiter B will be saying something different, and
yeah. I think we have some agreement here that brand matters, because we now have to introduce that whole concept of candidate brand, right? That we look at as recruiters. I think we all agree brand is a phenomenon that's for real. I think we can all agree that when we have a solid, not big, but a quality employer brand, right? Company brand, and we have great quality recruiters who support that message, life is good, right?
Yes,
So I'm going to ask you now to just mesh with that conversation. Stay with us, and let's bring up Mike Raymer real quick. Where's Mike? So we're going to take the conversation now to, we've got great branding going on. What happens when it's
that Yankees hat?
Oh no! What happens when it's when we've done too good of a job of brand, and what happens now? Getting back to how does all this affect the candidate bill of rights? And I think what we'll do is real quick have you talk through that, and then stay there, Julia, because we'll just keep this free flowing with all of us, if that's fair. Real quick reminder for those of you who are dialing in and participating from home, we've got the text chat open, so you can pose your questions that way. Twitter back channel as well. Dial in 866 number and ask your question top right hand side. So this session is for you, so get the questions going.